While Malfurion and the Druids sought answers, the leaders initially sojourned into Val'sharah seeking other ends. They were after Maiev, who in the wake of recent altercations at the Vault had chased off after Gul'dan alone. As with many of her other terrible ideas, this landed her imprisoned in nearby Blackrook. But before they could even get that far, the leader stumbled into the nearby village that was being assaulted by the recently raised deads, ghosts that proclaimed them demons. Sorting this out actually led them directly to Jerrod Shadowsong, Maiev's brother, who had come here for the exact same purpose the leaders had. Maiev had not broken, of course. Despite her failings, the woman was nothing if not disciplined. Seeking to get to the bottom of things, Jerrod, Maiev, and the leader joined forces to charge through the ghostly halls of the Blackrook Hold. The Hold was one of the greatest Night Elven fortresses in times of old, and served as their central point of resistance against the Legion during their first invasion. As they journeyed, they fought the ghosts of Night Elven soldiers who were lost to their memories, believing the Azerothians to be demons, as if they were still stuck in the War of the Ancients. Some of these even forged together into an amalgam of souls, comprised of 3 of the greatest defenders therein, though with its destruction the haze lifted and the ghosts opened the way forwards. After was Ilziana Ravencrest. This is a weird case, as this demon hunter was not actually a traitor. In fact, she was dead, as she died fighting Veritas Fellsoul some days prior. It is no surprise her ghost roamed here, as the master of the tower was her father, someone she had failed to save all those years ago, and someone she would do anything to defend, now given the chance. Her dissolution provided her clarity, and hopefully a measure of peace. Gul'dan had not left the Hold untended, as Smashbite the Hateful, 3-time winner of Best Name Ever award, was there to provide defense for the ghost of Kurtalos Ravencrest himself. Kurtalos was essentially the mentor who helped Tyrande, Illidan, Malfurion, Maiev, and Jerrod grow into the people they would become. But he was assassinated by Verothen, and then succeeded by Jerrod, who carried them to victory in that terrible conflict. Kurtalos had been forced into this eternal purgatory as a form of revenge by the Legion for his resistance, watched over by the Nothrazim Dentaleonex. A mistake, as always, as it led to Ravencrest's freedom and the Nothrazim's destruction. With the Hold cleared, the group learned the truth. Gul'dan had carried the body of Illidan here to perform a ritual, separating his soul from his body to better prepare the body to host Sargeras. This information reached to the Slayer, who coordinated with the High Lord to rescue Illidan's soul. They contained it within the Light's heart they held, and entrusted the result to Khadgar, who would use it to resurrect Illidan should they find the demon hunter's body. After all this was done, Malfurion's preparations were complete. It was time to head to Val'sharah proper. Val'sharah was the birthplace of Druidism as a practice, where Cenarius and others of his kind claimed as home when not called to action or defense. The leaders felt they were finally in for a spot of good fortune, as Cenarius kept the final pillar of creation, the Tear of Elune, himself, and, escorted by Malfurion, the group would be able to simply ask its location and take it. Sadly, Cenarius was sleeping upon their arrival. No, not like that. I mean, he was in the dream, trapped within the dream, and nightmare slowly seeping into him. Malfurion stayed behind to channel healing and defense into his fallen mentor, while the leaders split up to recruit the Archdruids of the realm. Each Archdruid had their own issues to deal with, including harpies and satyrs. One fought bravely, so much so that the Nightmare Lord, Xavius, personally came out to corrupt him. This Archdruid had to be slain, lost to the nightmare as he was, leaving them in bad shape as they retreated back to Malfurion. The Druids summoned forth Ysera, but alas, it was too late for Cenarius, who was consumed in totality by the nightmare. In a rage, Malfurion set off. Recall, Malfurion has fought Xavius more than once in the past, both in the War of the Ancients and just prior to the Cataclysm. The rivalry between the two had never truly stilled, and Malfurion recklessly fell into Xavius' trap. Xavius took the Tear of Elune, corrupted it with all his nightmare essence, and pierced Ysera directly through the heart, sending the aspect plummeting down and, in seconds, corrupting her very core. Xavius stole away with his prizes. On the one hand, Ysera, and on the other, Malfurion. It's right about now that Tyrande arrived, having raced here as fast as she could. Tyrande aided the leaders in their pursuit of Xavius, who tormented her with trickery and illusion, before finally providing her a sadistic choice. He sent Ysera to destroy the nearby temple, and dragged Malfurion into the depths of the corrupted tree Shaladrasil. Tyrande knew it was a trick, and so in her grief abandoned Malfurion to his fate. The group fell upon the temple, under assault by nightmare creatures and a corrupted aspect. It would have fallen without their timely aid. Sadly, there's no true cure for the nightmare. Ysera died, consumed by horror. Though in her final moments, Elune reached out from beyond and purified her favored child, taking her into her embrace and marking her passing among the stars. Sadly, there was no time for respite or repose. If there was to be any chance of saving Malfurion and countless others from like fate, they would have to fight the enemy on their own terms. It was time to deal with the nightmare, once and for all. First, they would have to deal with the intrusion into the physical realm, the Darkheart thicket that grew beneath rotting Shaladrisil, filled with monsters, corrupted, and corruptors. Archdruid Gladealus was once one of the most skilled shapeshifters the world over, who had trained and instructed countless younger druids. Sadly, this only made him more vulnerable, and while he could see the corruption all around him, he was blind to his own. This corruption similarly seeped into Oakheart, an ancient birth from Shaladrisil itself, and a sad reminder of the true power of the nightmare, for he had survived many catastrophes of history by his deep ties to the dream, which meant he had no defenses to which to turn upon its shift. A similar tale follows Dresseron, a former Green Drake lost in fog, and with both's defeat, Malfurion continued to calmly taunt Xavius, who was in turn rather rapidly losing his temper. Malfurion, having learned from his earlier mistake, remained unmoved in the face of Xavius' threats and tortures, and simply provoked the satyr. In truth, this was not Xavius himself, locked in the nightmare as he was, but his shade. And so as his concentration waned, so too did his connection. The leaders exploited this, shattering the shade and liberating Malfurion. With this, it was time to enter the dream itself, which by now was almost completely converted into the Emerald Nightmare. Though it's been with us since the very beginning, we haven't truly sat and discussed the dream yet. The Emerald Dream was crafted by the keeper Freya, starting with Gahanir, the first tree. This tree was birthed into this pocket dimension, which itself was a dream of the nascent world soul of Azeroth. The dream was easier to change and alter, making it the perfect proving grounds for the ordering of Azeroth itself. This process was completed long ago, of course, but the dream continued as a natural reflection of Azeroth, absent its people and civilization, instead filled with growth unchecked. It is this very malleable nature that made it so easy to convert to nightmare, and fortunately, the same would work in reverse, should the source of the nightmare be ended. Thus, Malfurion and the leaders had their goal: destroy the source of the nightmare in the depths of the Rift of Alm, and restore the dream to its natural state. Their first obstacle was Nithendra, the green dragon once tasked with defending Shaladrisil, now crawling in rot and pestilence as she stands guard against any intrusion. Next came a bevy of creatures so lost that destruction was their only salvation. We've spoken before of the 4 green dragons. Already tapped by the nightmare once, the door was open for them to fall to it once again. And speaking of familiar faces, Xavius had been busy converting Ursoc since his capture a short time ago. Ursoc was just as terrifying and powerful as he was before, and his destruction released his soul from torment. Elirethe Renferal was an interesting case, as she was actually dead. She was with the druids sent as part of a peace envoy between Garrosh Hellscream and the Night Elves. If one recalls, this is the envoy the Twilight's Hammer interrupted and, in a false flag operation, blamed the Horde for brutally murdering. Elirethe's soul had been sent by those Twilight into the nightmare, here to wallow in her horror until released at long last. Ilgnioth was an interesting thing. This is a nearly perfect, pure sample of Old God corruption, manifested directly as the cancer it is. It also wouldn't shut up about various prophecies, some of which came true, some of which are still outstanding. Either way, it was destroyed, and with its passing, the path was clear to Cenarius. As predicted, Cenarius had fallen to nightmare, though with Malfurion's concentrated efforts the Loa might yet be saved, after a sound beating, of course. So while Malfurion was busy elsewise sustaining Cenarius, the leaders descended down into the depths. The Rift of Aln was truly the darkest thoughts of the dream, and from its warped and twisted shadows came Xavius' true form, a bloated, distended monster, utterly devoted towards his vengeance. This was the Nightmare Lord in the core of his power, at his strongest and fully imbued. This was no laughing matter, even for the leaders, but at length he was destroyed, and left a broken elf as the dream restored itself around him. While the forces of the Void remained, this permanently destroyed the threat of the nightmare, and freed countless souls, both living and dead, from its slicked grip. The leaders, triumphant, returned to Dalaran with the Pillar of Creation, and received an urgent message. The Exodar was under attack.